Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
The Agile brand.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast, now part of the Agile Brand Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and I am so glad you're here. I empower leaders to delight their customers, and I talk to guests with a wide range of expertise who share meaningful insights, wisdom, and practical tips that you can use immediately. I'm also excited to announce the Trusted Guide Roadmap Masterclass for CX leaders who struggle with executive buy-in and are ready to go beyond CX fundamentals. The Masterclass gives you proven frameworks and takes you step by step through a 4-step model that will move you past the frustration of not getting your work done. It's unique because it's live, interpersonal, hands-on, and we give you tools and templates to help you build your CX roadmap. To learn more, visit empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. And now on to the show. Well, I can't wait for today's episode on the Delighted Customers Podcast with my guest, Jennifer Ashman. She is a CCXP, a Certified Customer Experience Professional. She's had over 20 years experience in marketing. And today we're going to talk about what I think is an interesting topic, which is qualitative versus quantitative research. Why should it matter? And this idea of experience design and how it all kind of fits together to help companies delight their customers. So Jennifer, I'm excited. A couple of things. One is she worked at some pretty big brands. She worked at Ford Motor Company. She worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now she teaches on the faculty of Michigan State University, an experience design course to master's students. And I am so excited to have her on this conversation. She's currently the CEO of CX Amplified. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, just take a minute or two to share with the audience kind of the highlights of your background and then what you're doing now.
Sure. So highlights right now have been I've spent quite a bit of time in the CX space, kind of migrating from marketing, but using those principles to focus more and more on what the customer experience is and how to create products and services that surprise, delight, exceed expectations. So a lot of the work that I do focuses on partnering with organizations to conduct CX training. What is it? It's a discipline. It's not the same as customer service. And
Thank you.
That's been important as it relates to training and growing the discipline, but also partnering with organizations to develop journey maps and really capturing what the customer's experience is as the foundation to identify and build a roadmap for how to make the experience better.
Excellent. Excellent. And so when, if you don't mind, we'll level set for some people who may not be as familiar with some of these terms we're throwing around here. Let's define some of these: experience design, qualitative research versus quantitative research. And what's the difference?
Great question. Multiple definitions. So experience design, as I introduce it in the course that I teach at Michigan State, can take on more than one definition in and of itself. So you hear some organizations have an experience design team and or they take an experience design approach, meaning that as they're developing and executing products and services, they're doing it with the customer at the core. Experience design also comes with various methodologies and processes to look at things from a design-focused approach. So in the course that I teach, while there are multiple models, I use the double diamond approach so that as you're thinking about the customer experience, ways to improve a current experience or create a new one, there is a process that starts with understanding the customer, empathizing with the customer, thinking about the things that they're doing, how they feel about it, where might the gaps be. And so it's wired into creating or improving products and services. So experience design is a broad topic. You'll find a couple different definitions, but I use the double diamond as a framework in the course. But as the course evolves, we start with talking about experience design tools and we migrate into how do you bring others with you to take a design approach and create products and services that are customer centric in mind.
So let me double tap on that a little bit. First of all, double diamond sounds very expensive. but but I guess what you're talking about, and what I heard you say, was this idea of listening and empathizing with customer. It sounds like it's a very human centered start to the whole thing, and not we don't just pull out our design tools and start designing, right?
Mhm. Sure. I mean, and this is where experience design and qualitative research, obviously, the topic is shared, right? So if you're going to invest in qualitative research, it's a necessity for human centered design, for designing experiences that are customer centric in nature. With the double diamond as a model, there are several. They all start with, customer empathy. They all start with understanding, who is the customer? What are their motivations? How are they doing what they're doing right now? Where does it hurt? And where does it really surprise and delight? What do customers value? And so there's definitely that relationship there.
Yeah. As we talk about quantitative research and qualitative research, I guess they both have their place. Would you help give some context to people who are listening who might not be in the day to day of how those two are used, and maybe when it's appropriate to pull which tool out?
Mhm. Sure. So qualitative research, the purpose of it is really to, explore, collect, analyze, the customer's experience from their perspective. What are they doing? What meaning do they attach to the experience? How do they feel as they move through the experience? And really trying to, discover deeper insights into the customer and how they're interacting with an organization, with a product or a service. Types of qualitative research are things like customer interviews, focus groups, observations, ethnographic interviews, so meeting the customer where they're at,
Mm.
possibly in their home, and getting very personal. And diary studies is another qualitative research method where, you're asking customers, as the name implies, to, to document behaviors, to document and share how they're feeling across maybe several days in a row to get that very personal, deeper understanding of the customer. So if you compare that to quantitative data, which I think, as you mentioned, has a critical place, quantitative data speaks to the numbers, speaks to the data, statistical analysis. With quantitative data, you can get key questions or indicators answered and tracked, trended over time. So you can watch at a more macro level, what is the performance, say, on customer satisfaction or customer effort score. Those are all really important. But then oftentimes, let's say a score takes a dip, then that triggers the question of, well, why? And what can we do to make it even better? And that's where I think qualitative data has a really critical role to play in not solving for and quantitative data, but taking that deeper dive into, well, what is the customer doing? What are their motivations? Where does it hurt? Where are they appreciative? Where do they find the most value in doing business with your organization?
So having been a practitioner, we got involved in a number of the things you just described, and know that. So there's different like investments for each of these different types, right? For if you're going to really have a quantitative tool like a customer engagement management platform, then you're probably going to spend like just an average size company. It could easily be 100,000 a year for the licensing to do not a ridiculous number of surveys a year, customer surveys. And of course you'll have to renew that when that contract is done. and and that's sort of like, we're not talking about like Chase Bank or Delta Airlines. We're talking about sort of a community-sized bank or a mid-sized manufacturing company. On the other hand, if you were to do a focus qualitative, and you just pointed out the motivation behind them isn't money, but just to give people kind of some perspective is that there are different costs involved with pulling together like a focused interview or an in-depth interview. And so let's start with like, what are we talking about in terms of what it might cost to pull together a group of people, and why would you do an in-depth interview versus a focus group?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the myths about qualitative research is that it costs too much,
Mm.
and that's chased by it takes too long.
Mhm.
And I feel from that perspective, I feel weigh that against the cost you might incur of not doing it.
Mhm.
What are you missing if you don't have that deep understanding of the customer and what's most important to them and where there might be gaps in the current experience that they have? So I feel that to me, that's the next question. What's the cost? What do you lose if you don't invest in qualitative research? I also feel that you can conduct qualitative research at any level, at any size and scope. So you can be a large organization investing hundreds of thousands of dollars to understand your customer at that deeper level. But I also do some consulting and work with TechTown, which is an entrepreneurial hub in Detroit. And you can have the same conversation about talking to your customers, asking them to share their experience, ask them to share their journey with you, and use that to inform how you establish the business, how you pilot the business, how you grow the business. So I feel that you can scale qualitative research in a way that best fits the resources that you have. I think on top of that, whether you're doing a one-on-one interview or you're facilitating a focus group, I think there are so many tools right now that are cost efficient and make it easier to have virtual conversations, to have virtual in depth conversations, even to interact and share visuals, share photos, share artifacts to trigger responses and drive really robust conversations. So, things like tools we're using right now, things like Zoom and Teams allow you to have, one-on-one discussions and schedule them fairly real time. So, particularly from the participant standpoint, it's easy for them to hop on and share their feedback with you. And I think the same thing with, focus groups, where in that environment, you've got multiple customers together. And for me, what's really magical is they build off each other so that you're getting diverse perspectives, but they're pulling out for each other nuances that they might have missed if you talk to them individually. And the insights from that kind of dynamic they're different. They can be pretty powerful too.
So fill in the blank for me. I would use a focus group when, and I would use a in-depth interview when.
I value doing one-on-one interviews when I'm looking for a deep individual customer journey conversation, particularly when it relates to journey maps. Tell me what the journey was like for you as an individual. And then you have that end to end journey, and you can imagine using qualitative insights from that to partner with other one on one interviews and develop a journey map with the voice of those customers intact. I think that focus groups are really powerful and valuable when you're talking about a generalized event or you're looking for general feedback, even for a concept where you've got folks playing off of each other as they react to it or as they react to a specific moment or specific incident in time. I think it's also valuable with focus groups if you're trying to get feedback on an idea or a concept that you're in the process of noodling and developing. that they can give that feedback early. And again, they can play off of each other, if you will, in reacting to it, in sharing, what it might look like, what might make it better.
Yeah, I think that's a great application. And I think, consumer products do this all the time when they're testing a new product out. They'll go focus group out and they'll try and, get emotions and get people's feelings about, how they perceive this particular product that they're either thinking about revising or a brand new thing that doesn't even exist yet, as you're saying, conceptual. One of the things I love about in-depth interview is it gives the interviewer, and tell me if you find this true, a lot more latitude to go in a direction that may not be prescribed. If you've got a focus group, you've got, multiple people in the conversation and you're trying to cater to a crowd, so to speak. We got IDIs, you can go deep.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's where the discovery is really, magical, and one-on-one interviews have that benefit of, you have the questions that you want to ask, you're intentional with those questions, but you've got flexibility and room to go deep. I mean, I kind of look at it like you have a hypothesis, you're armed with enough information that you've got some thoughtful questions to ask, but at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. And so when you give customers the opportunity to expand, or you have the chance to say, tell me more about that, how did that make you feel? You really uncover some very rich insights that you can take back to inform and improve what the current customer experience is.
If I can, I want to share some of the value of that the IDI and even the focus groups to an extent versus quantitative in this particular. So when I first got to the bank where I worked probably 13 years ago or 14 years ago, something like that, there was a concern in the treasury management area, which is the area that, if you're not familiar with banking, they have all the services for businesses. So it could be payroll service, it could be wire transfers, it could be ACH payments, and it's just your regular business services like checking savings accounts, but they're not necessarily in the loaning part of it, right? Everything else, your day to day banking needs. And the head of that area had a concern because he was hearing some noise from customers, and some of it was in the early quantitative feedback. We were getting some verbatims, which were the comments, and the noise was about the friction of the onboarding experience. So, new customer has to fill out all this paperwork, and then wait a minute, why is it so much work? So they were getting some noise from that, and so we did IDIs, and what we found out was something very different. What we found out was, yes, there was friction associated with that, but customers kind of expected that as a one-time event with joining a new bank. So it was painful, it was friction. They wanted us to do something about it, but it really didn't impact things like loyalty. So I'm just wondering if that resonates with you and the kind of work that you do.
Yes, that really is interesting, and I think that for work that I have done with different clients, I have tried and had the opportunity to do, I'll say, 360 reviews, with the end product being, we'll say, the journey map is an artifact, not the end, but certainly the beginning, right?
Hmm.
So, with a 360 review, certainly start with interviewing customers. What's their experience like? What does the journey look like? But then I also interview customer facing employees. So what do they think the customer's experience is? How do
Hmm.
they feel that it's delivered, and where do they see opportunities to improve it? And then ideally, talk to the C-suite. What do they think the customer experience looks like, and what do they want it to be? And when you line up those insights, it really produces a very robust conversation, because to your point, employees can tell you that they feel a ton of friction,
Hmm.
at a certain part of the process. But when you
Hmm.
talk to customers, everything's fine. And vice versa. You can talk to employees who can point to the process or a piece of the journey and say, it is seamless, it is error free, all 10 steps work beautifully. We have no problem here. And then when you talk to the customer, they're upset about it. And when you ask why, their answer in short is, well, it's 10 steps and it ought to be two. Um,
Mm,
and
yeah.
so, having the 360 IDIs and comparing those, talking about where there's alignment and where are the disconnects, it really informs the development of what the current state journey is in that map creation. And it also, excuse me, starts populating, the backstage elements. And really that helps create a service blueprint. So now we're talking about another design tool that's actually introduced in the experience design course, right? So, what is happening backstage to deliver the current journey? And now that you've got this 360 view, then you can get very thoughtful and deliberate about, okay, what might we want to do to have a positive impact on the customer experience? And oh, by the way, where can we find efficiencies across stakeholders, across employees in the organization to make it even better for them as well? Because they are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, so let me just double click on what you just said. Just there's a couple of gems in there, and also some words that, if again the audience isn't quite as familiar with it, could sound like jargon, and us CXers are very used to throwing those around. They're our language, but not everybody. So journey mapping, right, is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but journey mapping is really the journey the customer goes through with your brand, from before, maybe even before they even buy your product, to maybe even after they've used your product and they're no longer a customer, everything in between, from their perspective, from their lens. And then the service design blueprint is more of, how are we going to serve those customers? How are we designing our infrastructure, our and enabling our people, and how are we planning to deliver that to the customer? Is that fairly accurate?
That is definitely fairly accurate, and then some, Mark. So,
Okay.
yes, I think the key piece to the journey map, in my opinion, is that it's written from the voice of the customer. And I think sometimes that's where the leap occurs, because it can be very easy to fall into, but this is how the process works. That is not always what the customer experiences. And so the power of a journey map is really, it's stated from the customer's lens. And that's where the qualitative research is so critical, because you're capturing in that map not only what the customer is doing, but you're also capturing what touch points, what things are they using to move through that journey? How do they feel when they move through the journey? What do they expect as they interact with, with an organization, with a product or a service from end to end? And yes, and that service blueprint is what's behind the scenes, that delivers on that experience. So if you use a restaurant analogy,
Mm.
as the diner, you are having that customer experience, right? You're walking in, you're hopefully being seated quickly, you're enjoying a lovely meal, the check comes when it should, and you move on with the rest of your evening. That blueprint is capturing a lot of the things that are happening behind the scenes, as as well as, we'll say what the servers are doing to deliver the experience for you, what the cooks are doing in the kitchen to make the meal, things that you as a customer may or may not see. But from the restaurant's perspective, those things all need to hum in order to deliver the experience they want you to have.
Yeah, as one of the other professors, Lou Carbone, in our program used to talk about, customers they're gonna have an experience either way. It's a question of whether you're gonna manage the experience and how well you're doing that. And I love the restaurant experience so well, and it reminds me of the when I originally learned about journey mapping. They had, I think Oracle was the model, and they used this theatrical example of things that the customers saw and felt were on stage, and then
Mhm.
everything that the organization did was backstage.
Mhm. No, that's another great analogy, because I think analogies like that just kind of highlight the importance of, what employees are doing in how it affects and what the customer experience is like. And I feel that, in many organizations there's the opportunity to use journey maps to inform employees what the customer journey is, what their experience is, because in mid large organizations, there are instances where there are employees who are two, three, and more degrees removed from what the customer is experiencing, and yet they're playing a role in what the experience is. And I feel that as a tool, journey maps can be, if a picture says 1,000 words, journey maps can be socialized to other, employees, parts of the organization to inform and educate. You play a role. This is what the customer is experiencing right now. The good as well as the opportunities to improve. And so I think with that information, I think that can be a really strong trigger for different stakeholders, for different employees to say, you know what, I can influence that more. I can move the needle on this and make a good experience a great experience. And being informed and aware of what the customer is experiencing end to end, that I think that can have a huge impact.
Such a great point about journey maps being more than just about the immediate journey and the group that you're talking to, but more of a way to embed CX into the culture. I can't think of a better instrument or tool to help communicate what CX is to, we used to do it at orientation. So every new hire had to go through a journey mapping process, like a workshop, mini workshop. And what a great way to use your words, socialize CX and the importance of it. So you can, and like you said at the top, Jennifer, empathize. You're empathizing with it, and people, in the back office, and they're just as important and just as critical. Just because they're not on the front line in front of the customer, they're just as critical to the outcome. If you do something that helps put the person on the front line in a good light, and the customer is going to be happy, and vice versa. And it may not be any fault of your own, but this is to me a great dot connector.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's important to educate, you know, every player in the organization and make sure that they know that they're valued and they make an impact. Years ago, we did an exercise where, the catchphrase was, all roads lead to the customer. And employees, from different parts of the organization were sitting at tables. And the exercise was, map the path between the work you do and the end customer. And the folks in service operations had a very short exercise because 30 seconds later they were done. But there was one case in particular where a gentleman, his immediate reaction was, well, this doesn't apply to me because I don't have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the table rallied around him and took it upon themselves as a mission to connect the dots. And honestly, I think it might have taken about 5 to 10 minutes, but they connected the dots. And it was a real aha moment for him, for the room,
Yeah,
that, you might not see the customer, you might not be thanked by the customer per se, but you are making a difference. You do have an influence over what that journey is. And I think that was a really powerful moment for some folks in the room that, okay, I get it now. Like, I do contribute to this. I have a role to play. And the way that I play my role does have an impact on what's happening to our customers.
great point. Great point. So there's two other things you triggered of thoughts that I want to hit before we go. Number one, I'll tell you what they both are. One is I really want to talk more about the so what, and if someone's listening in the C-suite to this podcast episode, we want to talk about the so what to them, because they're going to be like, okay, we're doing all this workshopy stuff. What's the big deal? Why should I care? And then two is AI, because we hear a lot about how AI is the new thing and it's bigger than anything since sliced bread, and how it's going to impact the customer experience. And I think sometimes, well, before I editorialize, so let's start with the so what. So if someone from the C-suite was asking you, this is great, we're finding out what customers want. So
Mhm.
what's the big deal?
Great question. I think two things that come to mind immediately are those kind of customer insights, having that rich, deep perspective of the customer can help unlock new ways to strengthen a brand and drive loyalty.
Mm,
I just recently was chatting with someone about the Heath Brothers book, The Power of Moments,
Mm.
right? And it's all about intentionality with creating these memorable, powerful experiences that you can, really kind of build that lifetime loyalty with a very short, in many cases, a very short moment that's very personalized, customized, and makes that emotional connection to the customer. And so qualitative insights can help you find where those moments might be and then maximize that to build the brand and drive loyalty. On the other hand, I guess to look at it differently, I think qualitative research also plays a powerful role in mitigating risk.
Mm.
So if you are in the process of improving a current experience or introducing, creating a new experience for your customers, I think it is critical that you conduct qualitative research, talk to customers, or as we mentioned earlier, organize and present it to focus groups and get their feedback, get their perspective early so that you minimize or eliminate risk of a failed launch, of a poor experience, of missing the mark before things go to market. So I think that that's a huge element that should go into, I'll say product design, product enhancements or improvements. And I think, another thing as well is, the qualitative research can it helps find gaps. It helps find new opportunities as well. So while you may be delivering an exceptional experience right now, when you do that probing that you referenced earlier, that double click into tell me more,
Mm.
you can find nuggets of opportunities missed because customers are looking for something or they're duct taping something together to fill a void in their experience. And wouldn't it be neat to find those things when you have those conversations where here's an opportunity to grow, here's a new place we can play, here's another feature we can add. And so I think those would be, I think, really valuable reasons for a company to invest in qualitative research. I think it can have a very direct impact on the business, and certainly have a very direct impact on the customer.
Yeah, I love all those points. This idea of growing revenues, but by new product opportunities, by understanding what's maybe beneath the surface that customers wants or desires are not being met currently, and there's some opportunities. I also want to double click on the idea of risk. It's harder to measure that, but it is something that is near and dear to most C-suite people's hearts. It may not be something they verbalize unless you're talking to the chief risk officer, but they are worried about risk of, obviously retention related things and risk of losing market share and risk of increasing costs for some reason, risk of losing employees. All those things really do matter. So doing the kind of research, getting that kind of data helps reduce the risk and oftentimes is overlooked or, in favor of things that are more quantitative in nature. And not to say that you can't put numbers to risk, but they're important also because even the C-suite are humans and they make decisions based on emotions, and risk evokes a certain emotion from a C-suite leader that oftentimes takes priority over incremental gain in other things.
Sure. No, and I think, there are many organizations who have the resources to, thinking about experience design and the double diamond model or framework. There
Mm.
are many organizations that play with that second diamond, if you will, where they're designing and they're launching new ideas. So they're brainstorming, they're ideating new ways of doing things, and then they're putting them out into the marketplace. And that's great that they're thinking about new ideas and they're coming from areas of expertise. But if they're not informed by those first steps of empathizing with your customer, understanding your customer, thinking about the journey that they're having and how they feel along that journey, you're missing the mark. And there is that genuine risk of not incorporating that customer firsthand, literally bringing the voice of the customer into those conversations before you start brainstorming, before you start designing.
Yeah, great point. And so let's hit on this last point here, which is about AI. And let me try and frame out a question, because what's coming to, I mean, you can't really go very far or read some LinkedIn post that doesn't have AI, or go to a webinar or conference that doesn't have AI. And for me, I think there's a danger as well as an opportunity. Opportunities start first for me, and I don't know what you think. I'd be curious. Is yeah, we can automate things that are really kind of non-value added, that are either manual or semi-automated now, that don't really, that can be automated, and that's a whole slew of things. There's an opportunity to glean great information about customers from multiple sources in a heartbeat, where it would be almost unfathomable or just too expensive, cost prohibitive in the past. Great, let's get that information. But at the same time, experience design in my mind doesn't go away. It's still going to be a critical, whatever we're design, whatever we're implementing, or wherever we're trying to save or improve, whatever, it needs to come down to what the customer thinks, wants, feels, and desires. Would you agree?
Oh, of course. I think that, AI has done so much. You've had other speakers on your podcast that can speak to it in depth who are experts in the space. But from my small perspective, AI can generate or deliver some really robust insights, right? That are more than just the numbers, that are the words, that are the emotions, that are descriptors coming from the customer direct, unprompted. And I think that that's really powerful. I do think that there's ongoing opportunities, excuse me, with AI to package that in a meaningful, actionable way for the stakeholders that can do something with those insights. I think qualitative research has that opportunity across the board of how do you take all of that, take the data, take the information, distill it to an actionable place where folks can absorb it, can read it, can act on it. I think with the human qualitative research piece, I think that to your point, I don't think that's going to go away, because I do think, among other reasons, I have found many nuggets. I'm sure you have too, with the ability to double click, with the ability to read the room, to read the person,
Hmm.
to be able to say, tell me more, and be able to do it in a way that really adds value, in a way that you wouldn't learn, you wouldn't have that information otherwise.
Hmm. Love that. Such a good point. Such a good point. Jennifer, thank you so much. I have one last question, which I ask all my guests to land the plane, which is, tell me what advice you would give to your 20-year-old self.
Oh, there's so many things I would say to my 20-year-old self. I think, broadly speaking, I think what I would say is that it's important to have the plan, but stay flexible, stay open to new ideas and new opportunities. So I remember distinctly my graduation day from college at Penn State, where it was literally graduation weekend, and I had my plan. I was going to go to the job I had the offer for. I was going to work for 2 years and get my MBA, and it was a clear, definitive plan I was confident in. But right before graduation weekend, I was offered the chance to pursue a master's degree program funded in marketing, and be the only one in the program doing it. And so I wrestled with that. It was not in the plan, but I'm very grateful I chose that path. It's opened many doors for me. It reinforced my interest in customer experience and customer satisfaction, and the patterns continued from there. So, as you mentioned, I never would have planned to work across industries like health insurance, like academia, like automotive. I've had a vision and a plan, and it's evolved in, I think, a beautiful way over time. And I'm very grateful for that.
Hmm. Great wisdom there. Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show. Jennifer is the president of CX Amplified, and she is great at what she does, which she shared on the program. Also, professor of practice at Michigan State University, teaching experience design. Jennifer, if people would like to get a hold of you, what would be the best way?
I think LinkedIn would be the best way to find me there.
Okay, and it's Jennifer Ashman.
Yes.
All right. Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of my other ones, hit subscribe or follow. I've got a lot of other great guests that are coming up and a lot of other great content, and I don't want you to miss anything. You can find any links or references on the show in the show notes, and you can find those at my website at empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. Also, make sure to check out the other shows in the Agile Brand Podcast Network by going to www.agilebrandguide.com. The Delighted Customers podcast with Mark Slayton is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content.
The Agile Brand.